Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Jeff Bollig. And Jeff is the co-author of the book called The Dream is Real. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
All right. It has a subtitle you use, too. What is it?
My Life on the Airways by Bob Davis.
Yeah. And, of course, Bob Davis was, for many, many years, 48 years, was the broadcaster for KU and for the Kansas City Royals for a while, but previous to that, he'd been out in Hayes for about 15 years.
Right. And I'm from Hayes as well, so I won't date myself too much, but other than maybe his first year or two, I remember all of Bob's broadcasting years because I've kind of felt like I've lived his life a little just by following him. So, Bob's been a longtime friend of mine and someone I've admired greatly, and not only admired his talent, but his humility and the character of person he is. So it just was a natural, I thought, for me to do a book, not only recognize Bob's contribution, but quite frankly, it was a little bit of my life as well, following him and being involved in the sporting events. So to document Bob's impact and the funny stories that he told, I don't know if there's any better storyteller out there, and I don't know if there's anybody more humorous or quick-witted than Bob. So it was just a natural to do, and I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Yeah, we did an interview with him just a little bit ago, and Bob still has that quick wit, and he's very humble, just exactly like you said. And before we started that interview, he told me about you and what good friends you and him have been. And you grew up in Hayes, and how did you get over to KU, to the Sports Information Office from Hayes? How did all that happen?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm going to back up just a little bit because the ironic thing of this whole story is I never knew Bob in Hayes. Bob was such a legend and so highly respected. I just felt I was not worthy. And so, growing up, and I had opportunities. Bob was about town. He sold ads. He did broadcasts. I had many friends who knew Bob as well. But I just felt, wow, he's up there, and I just didn't want to bother him. So I did not know Bob in Hayes, and we laugh about that today. But I went to Hayes High School and kind of fell in love with sports and journalism. And so I wanted to do something around sports journalism. And so I went to Fort Hays my first year and absolutely loved it. What a great university and great teachers. So I grew up there. And, my parents knew all the teachers. I felt I just had to get away from under them a little bit. So I finished up at KU and got a degree in business marketing and journalism, kind of a degree and a minor, and stumbled upon the Sports Information Office. And not many people know what those are, but those are basically the communication arms of athletic departments. And they help do everything from produce stats to help games get on TV and radio to market programs. And so a little bit of everything. So my senior year, I needed 2 more class credits. And they said, well, why don't you do an internship in the Sports Information Office? I said, that sounds good, knowing nothing about what it entailed. And that's really where I kind of fell in love working with the media, providing media services and communications. And so from there, I went on to Wichita State and got a degree in sports management and came back to KU to do my internship. And by that time, Bob had been at KU. So it was interesting meeting him because my boss in sports information, a man by the name of Doug Vance, introduced me to Bob and said, Bob, here's a guy who knows everything about you. And he kind of looked at me like, who are you? So I felt almost like a stalker for a degree. But that's when I really got to know Bob personally, but I felt I'd known him because I'd listened to so much of his broadcasts over the years. And he really, along with my dad, he probably kindled that love for sports and journalism. And, at that time, probably people older know sports through the radio and can count on, who their stars were listening, whether it was in Chicago or Harry Carey or Ernie Harwell or all those, Vince Scully. But for me, my Jack Buck and those was Bob Davis. He brought sports to me. And so I'm thankful for that. And that's kind of how that relationship started. And we just spent so much time together. I worked at the Big 8 conference as well. And so I got to know Bob through there. So we've remained good friends over the years.
Did you have to travel with Bob and Mac?
I did. I did have the opportunity to travel, and travel is probably the best part to get stories, the hijinks on the road. It was funny. They coined a phrase. Bob and Max used it often. I think Bob really coined it, but Max probably used it more often. That when they'd come back from a road trip, and let's say they had lost a tough game. I think I tell a story in the book about Max dropping Max off at his house after a loss to Nebraska football. It was like 54-2 or something like that. And Max turns around and says, if it weren't for the games, these road trips would be a blast, and so that was kind of their humor. But many, many fun times on the road, and it was just great being around him.
Well, I can imagine that it would be. And when did you get the idea of talking to Bob about, let's do a book? Let's do a book. Bob, you got the chance to write it and people will love it. And when did that happen?
Well, I had written 2 other books, co-authored. I did a book on Allen Fieldhouse, probably about 2004. And then we followed that up with a series of short stories on Jayhawk legends, about 50 of them. And so writing a book takes time and it's time consuming, but it's a project and it's a goal. And so there's a bit of satisfaction in doing that. And especially if you can tell a story that you're interested in. So I had always had the goal of saying, maybe there's another book in me just, to do it for fun. And so I had talked with Bob and given Bob's profile around the state of Kansas, I said, we should do a book about sports in Kansas or outstanding coaches or athletes. But this was before Bob had retired, and he really, A, didn't feel he had the time, and B, he felt his story wasn't done. If he was going to tell a story, he didn't want to kind of have to tell it halfway through and then have events happen afterwards. So we kind of put that on hold, and how time gets away. We kept on thinking about it. And finally, right before the pandemic, and that's the interesting thing, the pandemic had not hit yet, but I said, Bob, we're going to do this book. And that was late February. And I said, we are going to do this book. And I said, we're going to sit down and tape. And I said, let's do it. And he said, okay. Bob was retired. So the one thing he didn't want it to be was totally about himself and about his career. So in the book, what we did is we used his career kind of as the platform to tell stories, give it a time frame. And then we interview about 50 different athletes, coaches, broadcasting peers, others in the media, friends, neighbors, and to give them to add them their comments either about Bob as a broadcaster or what events that were going on during their time or their relationship. So, it's a culmination of stories around sports, around Bob's life, but it's not totally, a Bob Davis book about him as you would normally think.
Yeah, and if I understand right, is it like 14 chapters in length, 200 pages?
Yeah, but just right about 225 pages, 14 chapters. The foreword was written by Kevin Harlan, the CBS and TNT broadcaster, Kansas graduate and a good friend of Bob's. The afterword is written by Wyatt Thompson at Kansas State University. And of course, Wyatt and Bob are tremendous friends. We have a chapter in there that was provided by Max Falkenstein. Max had passed, but he wrote a book and he had a chapter about Bob in there. So we reprinted that. So we have that. And then we have some sidebars as well. We do a nice little story about Tony Sands, the running back from Kansas who set the NCAA record. And Tony's wife was at the game with their 2 little kids and they were just freezing. It was against Missouri, 1991. So his wife left the game because his kids were so cold. And then she's listening to Bob on the radio. And all of a sudden, Tony had a great 4th quarter and the NCAA record was in reach. So she turns around, fights against traffic, and talks her way back into the stadium and gets there in time to see Tony set the record. So there's another story about Hayes, the sporting goods store where Satchel Paige came in. He played for the Monarchs, in Kansas City, the Negro Leagues, but they would play barnstorming tours. They played with a team called the Hayes Larks. They'd come out to play Hayes, and they loved going to Hayes because the families out there would have great barbecues for them. And quite frankly, as you know, during that time, there were sunset laws, but they were welcome in Hayes. They had a great time. And so they would come a couple times in the summer. So Satchel actually came out to Hayes, and he was a hunter, and he went to a sporting goods store and he autographed his gun and traded it for a new rifle from the sporting goods store. And then one other time, and this has been, fact checked as much as we could, but Satchel Paige got married in Hayes. He brought his girlfriend came out with him, and they decided to find a justice of the peace at the courthouse. and he got married. So there's those kind of interesting short stories that add some flavor to the book. It was really fun to talk to all these people. There were great stories and great people. And when you're asking him to talk about Bob Davis or his book, everybody wanted to do it. Bob's well respected.
Well, Jeff, it's obvious why the two of you get along so well. You think alike, and you have that demeanor about you, just like Bob does, a very calm, and that's awesome. And thank you so much for taking time to talk to Bob into doing that, to do the book. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened without you.
Well, I probably not, and I enjoyed doing it. And I think part of the reason he probably ended up doing it was because I pestered him so much. But again, it was great to tell his story. He's so funny. The feedback's been very good. I think the people in Hays appreciate some of the history and what they learned. And that is the one thing. Hays hated to lose Bob to KU, but at the same time, they're very happy for him because they felt he was one of theirs. And, he's been gone 35 years from Hays, but he could go back and he could probably run for mayor and win. He's that popular still.
I would imagine. And the book, of course, is called The Dream is Real by Jeff Bollig. And thank you so much for what you've done with it. And that book can be purchased, of course. It's about Bob Davis, and it can be purchased on Amazon.com. And it can be purchased right now in some stores across Kansas, some Dillon stores, but select Dillon stores.
There's select Dillon stores, Lawrence, Topeka, Hutchinson, Wichita, Derby, Andover, Salina, and Hays. So there's a number of stores there. And of course, everybody seems to be able to buy on Amazon.com, especially during the pandemic. So either of those outlets, you can get the book.
Well, very good, and a good job, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for visiting with me, and look forward to seeing the book go to #1 sales. That'd be awesome. #1 sales in Kansas at the least.
That'd be great, Doug. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, you take care.
Thank you.